Hey Dunchbags, what's going on? It's LandonRemixes here, and welcome to my review of the diverse 9th studio album by the American DJ and producer Kaskade. And this was also, if you saw my disclosure one, I said one of my most hyped album of the year was going to be this one. And for the most part, that's true. I didn't lie. I was really hyped for this one, and as the singles started coming out, I kind of started to get a little bit disappointed, but I actually was hoping that this album would be one of my favorites from the year. It definitely wasn't extremely disappointing, but it was a little bit of a letdown. And I'll just get into my opinions right now. The album starts off with a kind of fire in your new shoes kind of feel. That was a single on one of Kaskade's old albums. The intro sounds a little bit kind of similar. And with this album we get a lot more vocals from Kaskade as opposed to his last album. I think there were 2 tracks where you'd hear Kaskade's vocals, and that was Atmosphere and Something Something. And with this one we get a few more tracks. There's We Don't Stop, there's Mercy, and I think he sings on Paper Cuts as well. So one more track than the last album. That's a bit of a progression, I think. But I think with this album, especially with the diversity piece, we hear Kaskade experimenting with a lot of different styles, things that he hasn't gone into before, all while kind of retaining a classic house sound. Last one was a little bit more based around a tech house style and around the progressive house that Kaskade was known for. With this one, he kind of steps into the indie dance territory. You get a lot of indie rock vibes within his progressive house sounds, especially on tracks like We Don't Stop and Disarm You. And with his kind of introduction to future house and deep house, he had already been doing deep house for a while, but with this album he delves a lot more into that. Definitely a step forward from where the last Late Night Alumni album came from. But in a lot of ways, this album was a tad bit disappointing. I'll just get into that. Like I said, we get the indie vibes on the first track, kind of progressive house sound, but indie rock infused. Second track is a collaboration with CID called Us, and that's definitely one of my favorites. Takes on a little bit more of a bass house, future house style, which is exactly what I've been getting into recently, so of course I'm going to enjoy that. And I love the placement so early in the album, kind of providing with this banging bass house track. We get into the track Mercy with Galantis, which is one of the biggest disappointments on the album. Sounded like it could have been ripped directly from Pharmacy, and although I was hoping that would be one of the best albums of the year, and it wasn't necessarily that high up for me, I've actually kind of started liking it a bit less after I keep listening to it. This track feels like it was ripped directly from that. So although in the context of Kaskade's record it adds a little bit of diversity, I think it was just kind of thrown in the Galantis collab, and it could have been a lot better, honestly. Galantis makes a lot of interesting music, like Peanut Butter Jelly. That was a big one that was huge, and I feel like with this track it just doesn't really bring Kaskade's style out. It could have just been a regular Galantis track. Actually sounds a lot like Call If You Need Me. Tear Down These Walls is an emotional ride, kind of while providing a bit of a deep house style, sounding a little bit like Runaway by Late Night Alumni, but still a really enjoyable track. Phoenix is pretty disappointing, just overall fairly boring. The vocals are pretty soulful, but it doesn't really go with the production, so that was one of my least favorites on the record. Then we get into a couple good tracks, which were actually singles from the album. There's Never Sleep Alone and Disarm You, both kind of having a little bit of a future house sound. Disarm You with Ilse, kind of more progressive house, and one of the most enjoyable tracks, perhaps one of the most enjoyable progressive tracks of the year. Definitely fantastic. Never Sleep Alone, a little bit more of a future house, progressive house combination, and both of these are very enjoyable tracks. Everyone probably knows them by now, but they in a lot of ways make the record, and along with tracks like the CID collab and We Don't Stop, one of the most pointless tracks on the record, Day Trippin' with Estelle. She's featured on Blau and Nom de Strip's track, and she's done vocals a lot in the past, but this kind of revival of her career, I thought it worked good on the cover of Rhythm of the Night, but on this track I just didn't really see a need for it, and the production also was fairly disappointing. There's Promise, which sounds like it could have been a Lorde track, and I did like it. I'll admit it, I liked it quite a bit, actually. And it just sounds like kind of a Kaskade and Lorde collab, trying to put in another vocalist, but there's basically no difference. Ended up being one of my favorites as well. There's Breaking Up, which not much to talk about. Once again, you're kind of bringing Kaskade's old styles into this, which I think was part of the diversity issue. Kaskade wanted to throw a lot of different styles in the mix, and then after that we get the, I think it was the actual first single from the album, A Little More, with John Dalbeck. One of the biggest progressive bangers of the year, at least. It actually might have come out last fall. Music video was hilarious, and just one of the classics that this album was really enjoyable. I think I forgot to mention that this is Kaskade's first album since his departure from Ultra Records. He had actually said that Atmosphere was denied because he wanted to put a lot of different styles in, and Ultra didn't really like that, which I kind of saw where he was going. Atmosphere was a little bit more commercial sounding, especially with the Project 46 collab, which is extremely commercial EDM, but still enjoyable regardless because it's Project 46. Paper Cuts, also fairly enjoyable. And then we get to the kind of somber Where Are You Now, which I can't help but feeling kind of got inspiration from the Jack Hugh and Justin Bieber collab. Kind of similar lyric styles on that one, and although it definitely isn't the same type of track at all, just can't help but feeling that connection. Actually not a bad track. And then it closes off with the track Whatever, which is a solo attempt by Kaskade, other than the vocalist on this one. Collage, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not, doesn't really matter, but this one definitely takes on a little more of an indie vibe, and kind of sort of reminds me of M83 or artists like that. And I think this definitely fit into the diversity piece. Didn't like this track initially, but in the context of the record, it works very well. So without further ado, I'm going to give this one an 8.5. Actually, for the entire weekend, I've been planning on, or I've been listening through these albums and everything. I was going to give it a solid 8. I felt like that's the best it deserved. Just re-listened to all the previews and everything, and I said, you know what, there's only a couple tracks I really didn't like on this one out of 14 tracks. I think it deserves probably an 8.5, and especially since I had given Galantis an 8.5 when that album was very not diverse, and I did dislike one of the tracks. So if I give something like that an 8.5, Kaskade definitely deserves it on this one. Like I said, there's a couple disappointments, but overall this one's very diverse, and that's where the album goes right, places where it goes wrong, just a kind of boring chunk toward the second half. But there are a few very enjoyable ones on this one. Definitely grab that CID collab, one of my favorites. Disarm You, Never Sleep Alone, although most people that are watching this probably have it. Whatever. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Make sure to go check out the record if you haven't, and leave some thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you guys later. Peace.